Morning,
Morning.
Pavi.
afternoon.
Hi.
Ivy's in Finland.
Woo! We got Suzette, we got Arunas, Gordon, Emily, Ryan, Julia. We got Denise, hello, Laura. Lena, great. And Manushi, hello. Got Emily, Tina, Julia. Welcome, welcome.
You let me know when we should start.
Yeah, Dave can do that.
Sharon, did you say we should go?
Yeah, I think we're good. We're ready to go. Everything's set up.
Okay. Thanks, David.
Yep.
Thanks, Sharon.
All right. Okay. Welcome, everybody. So we've got a very interesting day with a very, very amazing woman. I've got Michelle Chaban, who's been working with U of T for a long time and was a co-director. Well, I was her co-director for a little while at U of T and an advisor to the program as well. So we'll talk more about that. What we're taking advantage of today is her incredible history of transforming suffering onto the path, using mindfulness specifically. So we'll get more into that, but we're very, very honored to have you here. Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for joining our community today. I'm going to give a brief biography. And so I'm Deke Lee Oldershaw, for those who may not know. Michelle's ancestry is French and Irish. Her paternal family were the first farmers in the Mount Everest area as cattle farmers, and he eventually moved from that into mechanics as machines came into the city. Her maternal family was part of the French underground in France, who spirited British and Canadian and other soldiers out of France back to England. And her French grandmother was 15 years of age when she started doing this. She was raised in Toronto, now lives just west of downtown, but she's done a lot of travel and work otherwise around the world. Initially, she was a runway model, a photo shoot model for Elizabeth Arden in Canada, bodyguards and all in the Twiggy days, and left that to return to school and majored in world religions and religious study. In her second year at age 23, she was in a motor vehicle accident with a drunk driver driving who hit her, dramatically changing her life with 3 spinal injuries, including the cord. So the motor vehicle accident affected how she stood, how she sat, how she walked, everything else. So she went from being a runway model to an inert person. She still attended university with the help of other people, but would stand for all the classes because it was too painful to sit. And I'm going to leave it to Michelle to speak about how she overcame that pain. And at the age of 31, had a surgery on her back that helped her learn how to walk again. And so there were several times in her life she had to learn how to navigate gravity again and again. It took many years to become steady physically. Her area of expertise as a healthcare provider was pain management, hospice, palliative, and end-of-life care, oncology, and AIDS and family therapy. spending 40 years in these fields. She taught at University of Toronto and McMaster and won many awards for her work. She won an award as a non-physician, a non-surgeon from the Royal College of Physicians and Surgeons for her thesis research, showing how Dr. Kubler-Ross had never done clinical care of her research in the dying, although she claimed otherwise when she wrote her books. And eventually Dr. Kubler-Ross admitted this in her final book. So there was a lot, okay, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, she was strongly influenced by the Dalai Lama, and she can talk about that later. And she worked for another 15 years bringing pain management to University Avenue in Toronto, and was seconded from the Temi Latner School to the Health Canada to work on a national policy for end-of-life care. So her research into mindfulness and mindfulness meditation at end of life has become what she's worked with now, and many times actually, but that is what she's teaching at University of Toronto now. She continues to mentor let me just go back, sorry. The Applied Mindfulness Meditation Mind program started 18 years ago in 2005 at the University of Toronto in the social work department or faculty. She began with 3 workshops, and at the height of the program, we had 45 instructors and 65 workshops. We were larger than the whole Masters of Social Work program. It was built as a program with no walls because they cost money, and people relationships made our program. I'll let Michelle talk more about that. This program has 3 tiers of training, and she continues to mentor the community. She teaches in the foundations, and her life work in end-of-life care is offered as a certificate now called Mindfulness Informed End-of-Life Care. Her clinical work was informed by her pain, suffering, and losses after this accident. So in 2021 and 22, she had 3 surgeries on a knee and 2 in her spine. And her practice of mindfulness meditation overrode the pain, allowing her to live. She's now living in the city and in a northern forest with her husband, Peter, and her golden lab, Althea, one of many labs in her life. She offers retreats and is hoping our communities can continue to act together to make a better world together. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Michelle. I'm the meditation, a motivation first, okay. And then Michelle will talk about her life and transformation of suffering using mindfulness meditation. So let's all just stabilize ourselves, knowing that we've all shared one thing here, and that we've all shared some form of suffering in our lives. And we'll be continuing to experience it in different ways until we're able to apply the wisdom and the compassion that overcomes it. So let's start by just grounding ourselves well in our bodies, letting roots grow down from our feet, welcoming the earth as the most stable place we can be physically. And let's open our minds to whatever we take refuge in. Higher power, a Buddha, Christ, Great Spirit, whatever that might be. And invite that quality to allow the wisdom to emerge from today's experience. And let's ask that the compassion that's generated, the wisdom that's generated, may it not be just for ourselves, but may it be for this whole group, for our families, others we care about, for strangers that we haven't even met, and especially for those that we might call enemies. For every sentient being, our golden retrievers and other animals that we love, those that crawl in the ground underneath our feet, fly above our heads. So thank you. All right, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Decky Lee. And it's lovely to see you on screen and be teaching with you again. Let me just say, I hope everybody knows Decky Lee. I met her in a parking lot in Florence, Italy, where she was teaching at the University of Florence, and I was teaching in Prato for the University of Toronto at Monash University. And I have been trying to find her for years and years. And suddenly, I think it was actually 3 days before we went to Italy, somebody said to me, "Oh, you're going to Italy. Decky Lee's going to be in Italy. Maybe finally the two of you could meet." And indeed, we met in a parking lot. And I still remember her walking towards me. And then I attended her classes with the Department of Pharmacy, the Department of Psychiatry. And then there was a third, I think it was Department of Neurology, wasn't it, Decky? Yeah.
And you showed up on the last day of the whole master's program.
Yes.
So Michelle showed up for what people had gotten from it and had so much to offer people as well that day.
So we began working as one mind then. And one of the things that Decky Lee and I do well is fight with each other. Like we fight over ideas and thoughts and whatever. So we have that down really well. And that's good scholarship, actually, is what I would say. And so I want to say gratitude to Decky Lee because she came into my program at U of T as an answer to my beckoning the universe to send me somebody who would help me navigate some of the issues because I was not Buddhist. I had been practicing mindfulness meditation for some time, different forms of meditation. And Decky Lee and I met in a parking lot and the rest was history. And she really brought our program to a global level. And currently we're on every continent but the Antarctic. And I do think that's part and parcel of what she brought to us in terms of transformational mindfulness. So let me begin with gratitude for Decky Lee, also gratitude for Dave Gould, and also for Sharon and Arunas and anybody else who is here from Lama, Yeshe, Ling in the Toronto area. You know, the Center for Compassion and Wisdom is the organization that I work most closely with. I want you to know, all of you, that there is a very strong connection. I'm not sure of what the date was that when I met Decky Lee, but in terms of the process of that, we have had people like Arunas, Decky Lee, Shelley, Craig Mackey, and many others that have taught with us and helped build our program. So when I began the program, my intention was to have a Buddhist informed approach. And in those days, the Buddhists were, well, they weren't fighting with the scientists, but the scientists were fighting with the Buddhists. and the scientists wanted a stripped down version of mindfulness meditation. And they wouldn't let any of the iconic representations coming through Buddhism to be in any of the centers where they were teaching. And I said, and I had been teaching the Faculty of Medicine at U of T in the Department of Family and Community Medicine for decades. And so I said, don't be ridiculous. You are the scientists were as dogmatic as could be. And so I said, let's bring this forward. So as Geshe Lee would say to me years later, that we are to be bridges to people to find the practice and then back into their life. And it's an integrative model. And so I began working with that, not knowing that Geshe Lee had some of the theory for me that would allow me to start to feel safe in the practice of joining these two giants of Buddhism and the scientific thinkers. So MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBCT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, were burgeoning. DBT was burgeoning, but all of it was directed towards a mental illness initiative. And our program was to look at societal change, to bring in mindfulness as an awareness practice so that we could start to have equanimity. We could start to see, as His Holiness would say, we were going to try and grow better people so that they could start to be more mindful of what the whole approach was. So with that in mind, that's the work that Geshe Lee and I and others have done. And John Kabat-Zinn and Christopher Germer have said about our program that we are a flagship because we managed the shift away from a mental illness intervention to start to look at applications, scientific applications to education, to healthcare, to the corporate world. And I don't think there's any place in society, any nook and cranny that our students haven't taken it out to. So I can't take responsibility for that, but as Geshe Lee's meditations taught you, the roots were something that was our vision. That would have been back in 2005. And I had been practicing at the bedside by then for about 15, 20 years. So I'm not arguing that it's first off the gate. It was that we had a great deal of things that we had to deal with in terms of getting a university to start to look at an integrated model of different programming, different worldviews. So I'm going to pause and pivot now and just go back to what Geshe Lee said about my path in life. So yes, I was Miss Arden Canada. I was a model, and I did that for a couple of years after high school. It's a very different world than the world that I now work in. And it offended me at many different levels. And so I walked out of the shoot room one day and said, I'll never go back in there. And then I applied to go to university. And then after year one, I was in this massive accident, which changed my educational path, my future path as a person, and changed the path of everybody around me and the relationships I had. So I'm a great believer that suffering is the fodder of a magnificent life. And so I don't want your attention to go to suffering, and that's too bad, but suffering, and I'm deeply grateful for what took place in my life, because I got bumped onto a track that was remarkable. And it wouldn't have been a life I ever dreamed in. It just simply took place. And I felt it was deeply fated. So in terms of the accident, it was complex. And in those days, we barely had CT scans, so mostly x-rays. And so they couldn't find the spinal cord injuries for 8 years. Finally, after 8 years, I was given a CT scan, and they said, oh my goodness, this woman has been walking around with a collapsed spine. And if you have a spine collapse, the nerves get compressed, and then you start to lose the ability to actually work. So your functioning changes, all your organs start to maybe work at 20% less, 40% less. And so you're dying very slowly. And I had always wanted to work with the dying. So here I had an opportunity, and one day the pain was so significant, I decided that I was okay to die. And if I had a journey in that process where I got to study a wish to die, and I don't mean suicide, but a wish to work with what nature was giving me, that I could do that, and I would make a study of myself so that I would, if I ever got out of the severe pain, that I would have an opportunity to be able to reflect on my own experience, my subjective experience of dying, because that was certainly not out in the world, that people were looking at the dying and what their experience of suffering and living with that suffering was all about. And so I started to make a study of one, and then over the course of time, science advanced, took 8 years, and then they not only had the imaging technology, but they also had the surgical ability. And I was one of 5 people they did an experimental surgery on. The outcome of that could have been wheelchair bound or paralysis from the waist down. I was willing to take that risk because the pain was so significant. So I had the surgery, 1 of 5. Within 5 years, I was the only one still walking. Everybody else was either in a wheelchair and or lying down because the surgery didn't have the same outcome. By then, I was also using mindfulness meditation because it had come up in my body. I did not have any teachers to do it, but I was a theologian from way back and studying theology to become a PhD in theology, and actually studying Mary Magdalene's gospel and her work, which wasn't really well known in those days, maybe still not well known. But anyways, so I had a theological spirit, and I had a theological interest, and that's the best I can offer, is that that in that search for what is human spirituality, in the presence of great suffering and in life, because I believe 100% of us suffer and or that suffering is the cradle of life, and we are not always taught the skill set to deal with it. So I had the surgery, went into my master's in social work, had to stand again, even though I was post-surgery. And in the standing of it, I would have to say that, you know, you get identified by people as who's that person in the corner standing who has a brace coming up to her neck. I was treated extremely well, and extreme would be in capital letters, by the Faculty of Social Work. I never got to feel that I was an exception outside of everybody else. When I went, asked for a placement in palliative care, I got onto the very first palliative care unit in Toronto. It had been open for 6 months, and I was their first student. So I won't go into that story, but again, extremely well treated by everybody, both at the hospital and at University of Toronto. Made it through my MSW, was hired very, very quickly, which was unusual, but I was a mature student. I was in my 30s by then, mid 30s. Got hired very quickly into a job taking care of people with Alzheimer's and their families, to bring palliative care to that community. And we started a dialogue of suffering, and we started to work as a social network to take care of each other. There was 57 patients who had Alzheimer's. It was a locked unit, and 57 families. You can multiply that by 5 or 10, and that's how many people we took care of. It was a remarkable experience, and it changed at the time the culture of what dementia was all about, if we bring our humanity to that. So over the course of time, I actually got headhunted a couple of times. So I want you to feel into what it would be like to be a person who's differently abled, who is now getting headhunted and offered more money than the average salary in social work because of my experience and my knowledge around suffering, and how I was now starting to turn it into a clinical paradigm that was not a staging model, was not a symptom model, but was looking at our humanity and what suffering does to our humanity. So Dorothy Sowell is a theologian, and she says that our primary purpose in life is to start to look at having a dialogue of suffering. And so having a dialogue of suffering for Deki Lee and I, when we taught together, would be that we would have people do a meditation, and then we would ask them a question of what do they now know, and or to journal about a specific experience of suffering that they've had in their life, and what do they now know, or what emerges for them as wisdom. So we're going to do that today, a little bit later on, is draw upon that initial meditation that Deki Lee and I had, based on Dorothy Sowell's work of trying to find a dialogue of suffering. It is very different than talking about all the things that are wrong with you. It is about taking what your suffering is and looking at a transformational piece, and or just simply as it is, to be able to describe it. I'm working with a young woman now who's in her 20s, and I'm doing it as an educator more than a clinician, because I don't take clinical cases anymore. But she's the daughter of a friend, and she's an adopted daughter of a friend. And her birth parents were both drug dealers in Toronto, and she was born in utero dependent on heroin and cocaine, and her neurological system is just fried. And so I've got her, she can't concentrate for a meditation for too long, but we do just a very brief body scan, ask her how she's carrying the day, and then I get her to paint a picture, and it takes weeks for her to paint a picture. But I just found out that this week she went in to see her psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has been seeing her for some time, and she walked in and she had a portrait of herself. So just, bringing in something like that, but she had drawn, and she said, this is the pain that I live with, and this is what I want you to know about my pain, to the psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist said, this is a remarkable example of the kind of knowledge transfer that would help us all if we could get people who are suffering, that science can help, to at least convey to us what it is they're living with. So she's 23 and she's changed psychiatry, and a lot has to do with, I always used art, but Deki Lee has always used art in some of her work, and I see this as a form of contemplative art. So fast forward, I became a director of a burgeoning program. I helped build Tammy Latner Center at Mount Sinai Hospital. At the time that I was working there, we were the largest palliative care program in North America. We saw 1,800 families a year out in the community. So we didn't have the security guards at the hospital. We didn't have our desks. We would walk in to a room full of suffering. And for those of you who are clinicians or therapists, you know that that in itself is a boundary breach based on traditional therapy. But we did it, and we started to practice mindfulness and mindfulness meditation as a team to help with our resiliency, but also to reflect on people who had died that we were taking care of. So my team was doing that, and I had permission from the LINs and Mount Sinai and University of Toronto to do that. And no one else was doing that kind of work at the time. And we moved forward, and I built the what would be called the family and team counseling program. It in those days was to enhance resiliency and endurance, which much later on the literature came out around that. And the most important part for me that I sort of want to convey, besides the fact that our two communities have a long history of working together, actually doing foundational work together, and that Deki Lee's community gave me the safety to be able to go forward, because I only had the dogma of science that I had to really negotiate, because Deki Lee was at my side, as were her community. So progressively, from the age of 23 until about 2 or 3 years ago, my mindfulness practice would have moved into, from what science says, move from a state, which is a temporary condition. So think about you feeling joyful. It might be a temporary thing of 5 minutes or an hour, to a trait where you're just a very happy person, and it's very rare that you fall off the wagon of being happy. So state to trait is part of what happens in mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, is that the more that you practice mindfulness, the more you progressively move from state, which is a temporary thing, into trait. And trait is a more permanent self, or if there is a self, a more permanent way of being. And I say to people that you notice when you're in trait, when you've had maybe 23.5 hours of feeling peaceful, and then suddenly road rage comes up in you and you want to kill the bicyclist that just drove by you. And what in that moment of time you notice is that you're not your greater self or best self, and you bring yourself back home to yourself, and then start to reconstitute your traitness. And so why this is important, and I hope that this is, it's not too light a teaching for you, but the idea that I can go on Zoom or Deki Lee can go on Zoom and we can teach people about the practice. Deki Lee teaching it differently than I would, but a really good complement to each other when we do teach together, is that I've been taught that this practice is caught, not taught. And I think that what that means is that when you have a teacher, as Deki Lee was to us, and as Arunas is to us and others, Craig and so on, it is that you have the practice, it's embodied within you. And as you sit and teach it, people resonate with what it is that you are teaching, but more importantly, with your personhood, with the energy of your being. And so we have found that at University of Toronto, is that when we had to make the shift to a Zoom-based program, because we used to be in a classroom, when we were in the classroom, IBM came and said, we want to measure what goes on in this room, because we have been told that it's a remarkable field that is created of energy, a sense of healing, whatever. And they said, we think we have a machine that could measure it. So we didn't say yes or no, and it never really happened. But that's, I think, what a lot of people report is the resonance. And one of our neuroscientists who works, she's a senior neuroscientist at Sick Kids, she says that the literature is showing that mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, as well as rage, anger, fear, hatred, can be caught. And be caught by people. There's a fervor that can be caught, and that the neural resonance is actually something that is starting to be measured. We can see it in neurological tests with people through fMRIs, etc. And so the idea that what we're cultivating is mind, or a way of being, whether it be state or trait, and that this can be influential to other people, is a form of self-regulation moving out to co-regulation. So I want you to think, that's the science. I want you to think what that would mean if we had physicians and nurses who are destroyed now by COVID, and how much they had to not pay attention to what death was and just pay attention to the machines. So these are people that have shut down their heart because they had to, they were told to. And they went home often after 2 shifts, just fell asleep. They didn't have any transition time to do a meditation. Can you imagine if we re-skilled, invigorated people with mindfulness and mindfulness meditation who are in the healthcare system? And that's happening as we speak. So we've shifted at U of T out of just mental illness tools to now starting to look at resiliency and endurance. Second thing is that, what if we had that in the educational system? All these little ones that have to go off of Zoom, whether they did well in Zoom or not in Zoom, the ones who did well in Zoom are now lamenting that they have to leave their computer screen and go back into classroom with people that bully them. And the kids that didn't do well are afraid to go back for the same reason. So we could teach them, and we are teaching them mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. In the corporate world, where the corporate world looks at the bottom line as dollars, we're asking them to look at the consequences of those bottom lines and maybe go for a mid-range. And my successor, Michael Apollo, is training hundreds of the corporate world. As I know, is, what's his name, Decky Lee? Your friend, my friend, the Potential Project anyways.
Oh, Rasmus Hagad.
Rasmus is doing this as well. So we're seeing that this is being taken up in components of society and taken forward. And the key people that helped make that happen. And U of T was one of the key programs, as John Kabat-Zinn and Christopher Germer say, we're ground zero for what it is we've tried to do. And now other people are following through on that. So within the last 2 years, my pain was so significant. I helped bring in the pain scale on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst pain that you've ever had. Where are you at? I would have answered 10,000 out of 10. It was beyond imagination, the pain. People like Decky Lee and Arunas lived it with me. One night, Arunas was teaching with me, and he said, I'm calling an ambulance. And I said, yeah, don't you dare. And I guess that part of that is that this pain had become such a companion for me that I didn't need to draw attention to it. I just lived it. People knew I lived it. People that were close to me, like Decky Lee, Arunas, Michael Apollo, and others, Shelley, they saw it in my face. They saw it in the way I held my body and the way I would walk. They mostly saw it in my fatigue. And so we just lived it. And we lived it in an unremarkable way. But what I would say is that it was always very present as a third party that we had to take care of. And people were extremely kind to me in that. So I think that goes against what a lot of people think happens with suffering, is that people get abandoned. I was not abandoned. And at the same time, I was able to work, even though the pain was huge. Now, I don't think that using mindfulness and mindfulness meditation to override your pain is a really good plan. However, when the surgeons asked me how I managed to live in such pain and have such an important and purposeful life, I said mindfulness and mindfulness meditation. And I have a surgeon who's neuro-ortho trauma, neurological, orthopedic, and dealing with trauma to the body. And he said to me, I wish I had that. And I said, well, I can teach you that very easily over the course of time. And then you have to keep the study going yourself. So on the day that I had my spinal surgery, which was last spring, I'm coming up to the 12th month on March the 10th, it'll be 12 months. They said it takes a year to recover from, because the spinal surgery affects your neurological system. In the room during the surgery, there was about 20 or 25 people, including 2 nurses who were there to monitor my neurological system. Some of the people that were in the room reported that I was so calm before I went under the surgeon's knife. I was calm because I had a relationship with my surgeon. There was 3 teams working on me. And the surgery took place over 2 days, 5 hours the first day, 6 hours the second day. They were worried for me because I'm 71 years of age, and they were afraid that somebody who had lived from 23 to 71 with that kind of catastrophic pain, that my neurological system would not be able to bear one more demand on it. And they told me that the consequences of the surgery could be death, bleeding to death, and or just not coming back. And I said, I'm absolutely fine to go forward with this. My decision to go forward was less that I was brave, although I was, but more that my husband was my caregiver all those years. He was also the driver of the car that was hit by the drunk driver. and I was in the passenger seat. I really wanted to help alleviate his suffering as caregiver. Some of you here know what it is to be taken care of. Some of you know what it is to be a caregiver. This is a relationship that's very entangled with each other. And my husband had had 40 years of taking care of me. I just saw that at 71, I was going to only get worse. So I was prepared to try anything so that my husband didn't have this burden. Nor actually that I would even have to have him come to visit me in a long-term care facility. So I just want you to follow that pathway, and that the team said that as they started to do the surgery, they felt a tremendous calm and peace come over them. They actually called it love. So you know that scientists often don't speak about love, but they were speaking about this loving calm that came over them. And I laughed and I said, there's 110 minimally people around the world that are meditating as we go through the surgery, not for me, but for the stealth of the surgeon's hand and eye, that may that be a gift to come upon him, and may he do his best work for all of us. So within a very short period of time after the surgery, I was discharged, I think within 24 to 48 hours at my request. The reason for that, in my view, was that I went into the surgery doing my mindfulness meditation. And for some of you who worked with me, my choice, of course, is body scan with loving kindness and gratitude. So I went into that beforehand. I got up early before the surgery. Surgery started at about 6 a.m. Got up and started to meditate. For me, that means awake and lying down in bed. And then we moved into the surgical theater. Again, very calm. Moved into the anesthetic, very calm. Came out of it, very calm. Went to my room, calm. And the surgeon was watching me to see whether my practice would survive the continuity of what that was. And I think we both would say it was a remarkable experience. They had me on a morphine pain pump. I was the person that, with the team, brought in the morphine pain pumps way back when, in the late 80s, early 90s. And so here I was experiencing what my patients had experienced, and it was making me stoned. And that's curious in itself, is that the surgeries that I had were abdominal surgery to open me up from my rib cage down to my pelvis, so that they could then go in and access the base of my spine from sort of behind my bowels and underneath the roof of my spine. And then the next day they opened me up in the back and put in the cyborg part of me that is screws and rods. It's metal to hold up my spine that was completely collapsed. So this practice sees us through remarkable things. And I've spent a year practicing mindfulness and mindfulness meditation to focus on healing. Healing means, and I'll just be 2 more minutes, Decky Lee. Healing means to make whole. Curing means to fix. Curing comes from the root, Latin root curare. Healing comes from halen, which is to make whole. So when I was a social worker working with people who were dying and their families, and also my team, I asked them every day, what did they involve themselves in a healing process? So drawing upon some of the scientists that are now showing up in mindfulness meditation, what one thing can you do today, in this moment in time, that would make your situation just a little bit better? And if you're practicing the whole and the all, what makes you better makes everybody else better as well. So what one thing could I do when my pain was really unmanageable? It might be to sleep, it might be to have a hot bath, it might be able to write an email to somebody who's suffering as well. There are lots of things that I would choose to do. There's a plethora of things to do. So I just used that in the last year, and I had to be in bed for about 7 weeks after the surgery so that the bone would grow on my spine again. That is a difficult thing to do if anybody's going to do it. And I know Decky Lee has spent a lot of time recovering, lying down in those early days after the accident. I know Arunas has probably spent a lot of time lying down. And so I just want us to hold the wisdom of the drunk driver and the gift that he gave me around my suffering. I did begin talking about suffering at U of T when no one else was doing it. We talked about pain, and that was my expertise. And pain management didn't really exist before that. And there was lots of misuse of pain management that today we live as the fentanyl crisis. That's like sort of the decades later, that's the consequence of it. So every day I ask myself, what one thing can I do right now in this moment in time to make this situation just a little bit better? It assumes that you're holding the suffering as it is, but then Decky Lee taught me about transformational mindfulness. And so I started to work with that more than just bare awareness. And I would say it's absolutely possible. So Decky Lee has given me a great gift, as has mindfulness meditation, as did the drunk driver. So have I left anything out that you think I should speak to Decky Lee or Arunas? And Arunas is with us, he's just resting.
And I think that's beautiful. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
So I'm still going to be here and we're going to do the meditation. But one of the things that Decky Lee and I guess, have shared is that Decky Lee brought to me an understanding of a greater understanding. Like if I had 20% or 10%, she was the 80 or 90%. And so we cross-trained each other, and Decky Lee cross-trained me in terms of the bridging piece of Tibetan Buddhism. And I had met His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Jimpala at a conference in Montreal. And when I say met them, there was me and 5,000 other people. So they weren't paying attention to me, but I was paying attention to them. And I was so struck by the presence of them both. But at one point, I think it was a little faux drama as a teaching tool, which Decky Lee and I often used ourselves. And that was that His Holiness got very frustrated with Jimpala, and Jimpala was a young man in those days. And His Holiness was on a beautiful raised throne, and Jimpala was sitting on the stage, well below his knees. And so everybody would have noticed that there was a difference in terms of presence. And then His Holiness started to speak sternly to Jimpala, and Jimpala held his ground, just deeply, lovingly, compassionately, and responded with the most beautiful voice. And so I thought to myself, if my senior teacher did a whack-a-mole on me, I would be very upset. And I don't know that I would be embarrassed for that person, as well as for me, as well as for the audience. And so I caught what it is that took place right there. And when I say I caught it, I didn't learn for 15 years. That caught rather than taught is part of how this is being experienced, at least in my community in the West. And so I thought this was remarkable. What is that? As I walked away from the conference, what is that? And I had already been doing meditation, but I caught something else. And I've told Jimpala that because he's often crisscrossing once or twice a year on pathways that I'm on. And he's a reluctant teacher, he would say, but I have a lived experience of this catching. And I would say now what I caught was love and compassion and all the other qualities that go with that. I would say that it pierced my heart. So I was a PhD student working at University of Wales, teaching at U of T. very much in the enskulled brain, it caught my heart. It pierced my heart. And I have never been the same since. And, you know, I also would say Deki Lee and I do this. Jimpala talks about the stupidity of stupid compassion. And so Deki Lee and I are mindful that we don't sacrifice ourselves so completely, because both of us live as differently abled people. We have limited reserves. So Jimpala taught us that. And the most important, I think, part of Deki Lee and I is fierce compassion, that we are ready to step up and into a situation with our hearts. And that's what that day I learned from Jimpala and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. So Deki Lee, I'm leaving it to you now, if you wouldn't mind talking about, and I want you to say this doesn't come easily to us to speak publicly about our suffering, because there's so much misinterpretation that can go on. But when Deki Lee was in her accident, Shelley was very much involved in taking care of her, as was Lori and others. And we didn't know whether she'd live or die. And I asked everybody to meditate that she be taken to where she's meant to be. And although Deki Lee sometimes can curse me for making that arbitrary rather than let her go of her body, I've never seen anybody suffer as much as I've seen Deki Lee suffer. And I couldn't help her a lot because I'm in Toronto and she's out towards Dundas. And yet I kept touch with her community about how she was suffering. And I think if she didn't have her community meditating for her and her walking that walk with her own body memory of meditation, she wouldn't be here to talk about this today. So it's a celebratory moment for me, not only to be able to teach with her, but also to have her give voice, because I'm not sure that we've ever really given voice. We talk a lot about what works and doesn't work, but so over to you, Deki Lee, if you'd give us just a little reflection on yourself.
Great. Thank you very, very much, Michelle. Okay, thanks so much. Okay, a little bit about me. Some of you know this, others don't. I have a background as a nun with this lineage, with the Dalai Lama as my head inspiring teacher and others. I was a nun for 7 years and then came home to take care of my dad, who'd been in a car accident and broke his neck, and took care of him. And together, that's when we started the Lama Yeshe Ling and Center for Compassion and Wisdom with a group of us. What I'm going to address is the transformation of pain over the 8 years, since, into the various stages of transformation of the pain that I experienced after that accident. And also the main part of it is really the power of the mind. I developed something called transformative mindfulness methods 35 years ago when I lived at the Fintorn Foundation in Scotland. And what that does, it adds an extra step to basic awareness, which is mostly what mindfulness is about. The transformation step that can be a very quick, radical shift. And I worked a lot with cancer. I worked a lot with abuse. Actually worked with a lot of everything. At this point, there's people trained in 15 countries. And in many ways, I'm just holding the legacy and advising and doing one-on-ones now and then. So the situation with this accident is I was in a coma and induced coma, and then after 5 months in the hospital, spent 3 years, on a nursing floor of a senior's home. It took a long time to get off my back and to start to move again. And I still walk with 2 poles instead of a walker because of a pretty traumatic brain injury, which keeps my balance not quite fully there. I live with one side of my body like someone who's had a stroke. And what was very interesting was when I was in the brain injury ward at the hospital, they taught mindfulness. And I remember walking in to do it. And the woman who was there saying, "Oh, what are you doing here? You taught me. Thanks for coming." And I said, no, I'm actually part of this group. "Oh, okay." And she led a mindfulness that focused on pain and bringing your focus back to pain and bringing your focus back to pain. And I had to share with her after, it's like, I don't know if I actually taught you that specifically. I wouldn't do that actually. Like I'm in 8 times more pain now than when I left, than when I came into the room. So I realized especially with a brain injury, that there was really no way to focus, to stay focused. It was like having a wild amygdala, in fight, flight all the time. So even with my years of doing it, couldn't do it. And realized it was by bringing Lori Goldblatt in to do transformative mindfulness that I was familiar with, that kept my mind busy, focus here, focus there, ask for help, watch what happens. It gave the mind something to do. And for people who were early in the mindfulness game, that was perfect. But also for people who'd been doing mindfulness for a long, long time, it took it into a radical transformative step. So I found that was really the only mindfulness-based practice that really transformed pain. I would do my other Buddhist practices nightly, slowly getting them going again. And that reinforces positive transformation. But this was radical transformation in actual pain itself starting. So the interesting thing is, I'd say the basis of it is using pain, learning how to use it. Someone could actually get enlightened using pain, use it again and again and again, and for all sentient beings. You can, if it's there in front of your nose, then you may as well be using it. So the first time what I did find is I couldn't make it happen. I couldn't make this transformation happen. It came in time. And I'd have to say that's where self-compassion had to come in. And I don't have a lot of it, but I had to learn it, or learning patience, just responding versus pushing. So early on, we did it. And what we did is we transformed that suffering. But a few years later, I remember looking out the window, because I lived very close to 2 seniors' homes, watching the walkers go by, watching the pain go by, watching that all the time in different ways, then looking around and looking at my own walker. And heard this little voice inside going, "Why are you calling it pain? It's just sensation." Oh yeah, you're right. The pain is triggered by your mom's pain, your dad's pain, the pain you've had in your life. It's so triggered by so much other stuff. Why are you loading it on just something as simple as sensation? And sensation was in the moment. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute, I'm always feeling sensation. So that's no big deal. I'm just feeling more of it. And then I looked out the window again at people going by with their walkers, and oh, they are too. And then I'd see a young person well, actually you can't see it, but they are too. So it took it out of the past, it took it out of the future, it brought it right back into the present. So that was a real transformation that took the time it had to take. And I have to thank Lori Goldblatt for helping to facilitate that. And took a few more years, because it's been 8 years since this accident. And the sensation has not changed. It's the same as it was 8 years ago. It's just the head has changed around it. I did it again with Lori. And what transformed was I just started with sensation, and by using just sensation and how I feel it in my body, I used it, it transformed into using it as energy to help others and help myself, which was very different again, and showed me how I might be able to do that. And so I'd say the key is the patience, taking the time, and the self-compassion that comes out of that mix. And that then turns into compassion as you look out the window, realize everybody else is experiencing the same thing in some way. And then as you watch the birds fighting each other for food, you start to see it and you start to understand this is pretty universal. And from there, and the importance of transforming it, the importance of creating what we're doing with our practice, the positive things around it, just to reinforce it. But I'd have to say, one of the main things that I seem to have to honor really is just allowing that transformation to take place when I'm ready for it. As somebody who facilitated that, I would have been pushing that normally, but this took years, and that's okay. And I know right now that Arunas is using the same methods to help beat his dance with cancer, a couple of times, and in a remarkable way, beautiful way. So I think that's all I've got to share, and just thank all of you for being a community that oh my gosh, Michelle was pretty much holding things the whole time, and still is really. And the group prayers, within 6 hours of that accident, there were prayers going on around the world and in monasteries around the world. So the power of prayer has a lot to do with stuff. Our bodhicitta has so much to do with for all sentient beings. And we're all so connected that way. All right, so thank you. Dave,
you wanted to say something about Dekili?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I remember from another conversation with Paula, you mentioned a perspective that there's no experience that isn't actually trying to help.
Yeah.
And Dan Siegel would say, trust emergence as a scientist, trust what's emerging and showing itself. And as Dekili would say, and then watch to see over time how it influences. So
yeah.
Yes, Dekili, do you want to say anything else?
No, that's it.
Well, of course, I could listen to you forever. And I always feel like Dekili is butter on my corn. It's just, corn is just better with Dekili around. And so here you have, and I don't know how many times this has happened to you, but if I didn't have the drunk driver and then Dekili had a flying Cadillac land on her, that these things brought us here today. And it was quite a long journey to get here. And Dekili could have talked about suffering before she had the Cadillac land on her, but and I could not have talked about necessarily suffering because I was into lipstick. But that when you have these experiences show up, it's your choice about how you weave them and what tapestry you make. And I don't want to say that people who are failing at making something lush are failing at it. No, they're on the journey. And if we can hold that journey with them, both as a meditative community, a prayer community, or just a social network. And so I I think over the course of time, consciousness actually changes. And so what I would say to you, thank you, Patricia. What I'd say to you is to me, this is a burgeoning practice in science. So for me to have a neuroorthotrauma young surgeon say, I wish I had that. He caught something from all of us that were meditating for me. And I hope that his practice will change over time, because this man is changing people's lives and old people's lives too. So I guess I'd like to shift now, if I got everybody's permission to into a meditation. Decky Lee, Dave, Sharon, I'm good to go. We got the groups already. Okay, so we're not going to do the groups yet, but we're going to do a meditation. It's going to take about 10 to 12 minutes. So for those of you who want to participate in this, please take your most dignified stance. It's a quote from Vinnie Ferraro, who was one of my teachers, a street kid in the United States, went to jail for drugs and came out a meditator, changed many people's lives. Take your most dignified stance. Just allowing yourself to center yourself, or as Zindel Sequel would say, decenter yourself from what the mind is worrying about, perseverating on. However you see it, centering or decentering. And for those of you who don't want to participate, that's okay too. Just simply sit, breathe. You might want to watch the group. So this is called the 3-brain meditation. Some of you might have done this. It's coming out of the sciences studying what the Buddhists do. And so Matthew Ricard was one of the people that most influenced science in terms of his having such a remarkable mind, that Richie Davidson studied it. Many others did too. And one of the things that they discovered in the 1990s was that our enskulled brain is only one neural hub. There's a neural hub of the heart and a neural hub of the gut. So I want you just to imagine, you don't have to agree or disagree with this, just let's have the experience. The enskulled brain is on the top of our bodies. The impassioned heart is in the center of our bodies, in terms of our core. And then being held by the pelvis is the gut brain. And the gut brain is our oldest brain. It's considered the primitive brain, the reptilian brain. So I want you to imagine that you are walking in the forest and you suddenly hear leaves or trees rustling. And you turn. If you have eyesight, you turn. If you don't have eyesight, you might turn because of your ears. What's that? What was that? But if you turn away from the sound to yourself, you'll likely notice that your gut, your bowels, feel like they've been turned into a knot. So the gut brain speaks, but we seldom listen. So knowing that now, I want you to draw to mind, and it's not going to be spoken about, so it's your private life, a situation where you had great suffering. And I don't want you, as usual, to take the 100-pound weight, go for the 10-pound weight, but you've got to actually experience it as having suffered. Could be a person that made you suffer, a situation, thing at work, thing in the family, or a global phenomenon, it doesn't matter. And bring that to mind. You can visualize the parameters of it. You can imagine it as a picture that you're sitting before. And really allow this gently to come into you. So maybe a little practice of Tonglen, you might draw in that suffering, hold it, and then just exhale without an intention. So you're just really marinating in the suffering that has been for you. And now taking your hand, put your hand over your gut as you think about this suffering and you're breathing it in. And what does your gut say about this situation? You can describe it in a couple sentences. You might give it a word. It could be gut-wrenching. It could be hurtful. It could be threatening. How would you describe this? There's no right or wrong. This is your private experience. And continuing to breathe. Breathing in, you breathe in. Breathing out, you breathe out. Now move your hand from your gut to where you perceive your heart to be. Now your heart's over on your sort of left mid-side, but you might not feel it there. So just where you feel an impassioned heart. And let it be a hub of consciousness or awareness for you. Having had this experience of suffering and having moved out of your gut reaction, what does your heart tell you about this? What one word, what description would you give to it? And you might note that your heart is the same or different than your gut. So they can be the same or they can be different. This is you inviting your heart to be a contributor to a perspective on the suffering. And noticing if it's the same or if it's different. Don't forget to keep breathing, breathing in and breathing out. And when you're ready, move your hand from your heart to the top of your head to the enskulled brain. And you can put it on top of your head or at the forehead, wherever you think your thought processes are the strongest. And continuing to breathe, but asking yourself, what does your enskulled brain say about this experience of suffering? What one word or lines would you use to describe it? And noting again, are they similar or different to what your heart and your head thinks? And now letting your hand fall back into your lap or wherever it's comfortable. Please give thanks to your body for the wisdom that it carries in the enskulled brain, the impassioned heart, and the gut reaction. And although these are three neural highways in our body, they meet in our enskulled brain. So you've heard about the gut-head connection. You've heard of the heart-gut connection. So Dan Siegel would say, these are three separate brains: the gut, the heart, and the head. And most of us, as creatures of our epoch now, our time in history, live in our enskulled brain. So above the eyebrows and around to the back of the head, where the spinal cord is. And one of the reasons that we struggle in life is because, and I would think this is true for your community in a strong way, is that if we try to go to our heart, we've been taught that our enskulled brain is wiser than our impassioned heart. We've been taught that data is more important than what our heart feels. Our heart intuits or our heart extends. And we have just lived through COVID. Some of us did not live through COVID and touched our lives. Some of us had COVID and continue to live. And some of us have not had COVID. All three of those approaches and relationships with COVID activate our threat system, which lives in our gut. If you have the practice of mindfulness and mindfulness meditation, you meet that threat system and you can soften it. Or you can just simply hold it as it is. The world has its threat system activated. We've got little balloons floating across the earth, and we're using $400,000 missiles to knock them out. We're on alert. And when we're on alert and we don't bring our heart and our reasoning mind to it, it can make us do things that we shouldn't do because they hurt others. They hurt ourselves. So Dan Siegel would say, use it as a 3-brain exercise. The practice is to notice what arises, emerges. And remember what Dave and Decky Lee said, everything's trying to help. But how much of the brake or the accelerator do we use when our threat system comes up? So what you want to do is try to integrate these 3 ways of knowing. And Dan Siegel would say, they're often not going to agree with each other. And if you integrate all 3, you bring a wholeness to what is your decision making. Bring yourself back to the room. And for those of you who have any experiences of trauma, you might want to orientate yourself to the room by looking around. This is trauma-informed mindfulness, that you allow yourself to be held by the room you're in. You notice how you're feeling. So we're ready for the dyadic groups. What we're going to do is we're going to ask you to go into small meeting rooms with each other. There'll be 2 of you or 3 of you in a room. And based on this simple exercise of the 3 brains, and recognize that probably in the next 100 years, they'll have many more neural hubs. And so there'll be more brains that we have to start to look at. Brain might even, so brain becomes mind in this situation. And as you're practicing this, Dan Siegel and I would even think Decky Lee and some of you might say that mind is not skin bound. And it goes beyond and between us. And so this is an exercise of looking at what mind is more than what these 3 brains are. They're neural hubs, and the goal is to integrate them. So it's like trying to connect the 427 to the 401 and the 410. They all flow into each other. And if you have one dominant brain determining everything, think about how much you leave behind in not being discerning. So what we're going to do is break into groups, have you speak about what you now know. So based on the suffering, that you can use your example that you meditated on, or you can use just suffering in general as a generic thing that we all experience. I think it's core humanity. It's a cradle of our humanity, but we haven't necessarily learned how to use it as the cradle. We tend to try to stuff it and put it away, except for the Buddhists. So I'm going to ask this question, what do you now know? I think Sharon's going to put it into the chat. And you each have 3 minutes. So each speaker has 3 minutes. So you have to be pithy and what you're going to describe. Don't analyze it or evaluate it. Try to simply describe it. And as wisdom, what do you now know? And then Sharon will send out a notice on chat or through the rooms, switch speakers. So one will be a speaker, one will be a listener. And then we'll bring you back after 6 minutes. So 3 minutes each. We'll bring you back at 6 minutes. Sharon will flag that you're coming back so you can begin to make the transition. Don't worry if you don't complete it, but just give it a try. Have I left anything out, Decky Lee, Dave, Sharon, about the instructions? No, we're good.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so we're good to go. We'll see you back in a little while, and just have an ease to this. There's no, again, performance, right or wrong. It's just about being and speaking from whatever brain or all three brains that you want. Okay.
No, I'm not going to ignore it.
So everyone should have gotten an invite. I see a few haven't joined yet. Okay.
John and Val still have got to.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Did you guys see the invite? So we have Margaret should be joining room 7 and Marjorie as well, and Yolisa. Room 8 is Michael and Pivy. Room 9 is Ryan and Suzette.
I admire your abilities, Sharon.
So right. So let's see. Who's left? John. Okay. Let me look and see where they are. I have not joined. John, can you go to 5? And Julia, 5. Trina, let me see. Oh, she's gone. That should be 10.
I was in 10.
Yeah.
Nobody else was there.
Okay. You should be with Val in 10. Would you like? Okay. Let me see. Okay, you and Val. Maybe could you guys go back?
Maybe Val stepped away.
All right. So, okay, let me see who's here.
If Val's not participating, I can go back into I can go for room with Trina.
Okay, Dave, thank you.
So Decky Lee, Sharon's doing that. Anything?
We're waiting for Val and Dave to move to a room. And we still have Val, so we need to move her into the room with Dave.
I agree with Dave. I think Val stepped away
Hey,
because
you.
she's not responding. Hey, let me just get me back on camera. Ah,
We missed you.
yeah. But I mean, I think the story got told. I mean,
You guys are still live, just to let you know. You have
Okay.
your people following you live. Yeah.
I
All
don't
right.
say anything that I shouldn't say.
No. I just thought
but the Facebook people
Myself.
are are privy to our conversation.
Okay.
Hi there then.
Hello, Facebook people.
You've
Yeah.
got a great light beam coming out of your left shoulder, your sort of left ear, and I'm sure it's coming from above, but it's also coming from you. So it looks great. You should have
Yeah.
a photo.
So maybe the Facebook people, thank you for staying with us here while everybody's in their breakout groups. Maybe you could spend a little time just considering what wisdom has come out of your suffering. What do you now know as a result of that meditation? So you'll have a chance to share anything afterwards. And Dave can monitor anything you'd like to share as well.
So for the Facebook people, you can just type in comments, and Dave monitors both the Zoom and the Facebook. So you'll be able to contribute as well.
That's great. And then we'll just swing into it the way you designed it, Michelle.
Okay, I'm still confused.
No,
Oh,
no,
hi, Gordon.
Gordon, you're muted.
There we are. I guess I wasn't really sure how to switch rooms, or I ended up back here. So
Well, thank you for showing up.
yeah.
Sharon, do you want to put Gordon back in a room, please?
Okay. Do you remember what room you were in, Gordon?
I was with Jacqueline, I think.
You transcended back, did you?
I did. I don't.
You got beamed back.
I think you could just go back and join
Oh, okay.
before. Try that. Because I'm looking, I can't really move you. I'm not sure.
Join breakout room. There it is. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Bye. Okay.
Becky, can you just tell me, and if we can't get to it, then we'll just do what we can do, but you
No.
want people to come back and put in the chat box?
No. Let's
Okay.
forget that. We're just swinging with your rundown. Exactly the way.
Okay, all right. How many groups do we have, Sharon?
We have 10 rooms. So 21,
Okay.
3 and 1.
How verbal are they as a community? Are they willing to share or, cross train or? So if I get 3 different groups speaking, I think that will be good enough. And I would like everybody to comment. So I'm going to start with trying to get 10, but I also want to give people room not to have to speak. Are you okay with that, Becky?
Yeah, we tend to have maybe three of us that tend to talk most.
Uh-huh.
And so I'd like to invite other people to speak.
Okay. I'll go for the whole group and see. We're at 11:30 now, so that's the thing that I want to not overdo.
Yep. So it's
Closing in 20 seconds.
It's keeping it pithy. And we'll do when they come back. Okay, let me just say something
I'm listening.
to everybody.
Oh, okay.
Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Hello, welcome back. Thanks for dancing in the group. Some danced in and out. Thank you. Have we got everybody? All right, thanks for coming back. So this is normally where in our regular group that Kedrup would do a dedication and we would continue with question and answer and just whatever we needed till 12 o'clock. What we're going to do today, because most people do stay on, is if anybody does have to go, we thank you very, very much. And please dedicate your time here with us. And we invite everyone else to stay on as Michelle carries on, and we we talk about what our wisdom is. We glean the best out of everybody's experience. Okay, Michelle.
Thanks very much, Decky Lee. I just would like our attention for this moment in time to go to the fact that we have Aruna showing up on screen, and he's probably going to kill me for having us pay attention to him, but he's such a beloved of mine, and so I am very grateful that he's come back. And thank you, Sharon, for taking us through that group piece and everybody that was able to share. I'm going to begin by seeing if we can all just reflect on one word and or one or two sentences. So you have to be pithy again on this. What is it you now know, given the fact that we've done a meditation boldly engaging suffering and marinating in it for a bit, not necessarily transforming it, and then bringing it forward as a wisdom tradition in your life. So I'm going to call out people's names if that's okay. And if you are one of two people that were in a group, if the person that I call out your name, if you say so-and-so was in a group with me, then you can speak as well. So that the two of you can speak as a group. Is that clear? Anybody not clear? Show me through the icon. I'm not clear. It can just be your hand raising. Oh, Michael Bortbrooker, thank you for that. Okay, and we're going to try and be smart on this, just because I don't want to keep you past your time because it's lunchtime and other things. So if I could begin with Yolisa, if you don't mind.
Okay, hi, my name is Yolisa. Hi.
Hi.
I think the greatest thing that I learned, I think for me it was this, like, the sorrow of not listening to myself as much as I should, that there are parts of myself that are not integrated for sure. I think I'm in my head a lot, and am I supposed to just have one word?
One word or two sentences. So you said
sorrow. For
That's
me, it's
great.
about sorrow.
Thank you. And Yolisa, what I'd say is, if you can take what you learned and put it into an intention, I will endeavor to try to integrate and listen to my body more, rather than saying what's wrong with you, because that part of saying what's wrong with us actually creates a neural pathway of our threat system. So to really joyfully set this as an intention, that throughout the day, I'm going to pay attention to what my body has to say and see if I'm a smarter person after it. So that's would be the next step in this. So thank you so much. Who was in your group, Yolisa?
Marjorie.
Marjorie, could you give us?
And there was somebody else, but I didn't get her name.
Okay. Maybe Marjorie will know.
I guess my thoughts were just that we learn from suffering, and something good can come out of it.
Yes. It's a catalyst and an alchemy. Marjorie, do you know who was in your group?
Yes, it was Margaret Marino. She had an appointment and had to go.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. So Julie, you next.
Yes, Michelle, I was in a group with Anushi, and the words that come to my mind are warm and grateful, because I learned a bit more about the center, which is what I really want to do, is have a greater connection in community in my own area. But I want to take a pause more often to check into the gut. Yeah, and I want to thank you and thank the people today. It's been really a great morning for me. Thank you.
And I thank you for showing up in class so often in so many different ways. And you're a very beautiful associate as a learner. We're all learning, but thank you. Anusha?
Hi, yes, just that transformation, and that to be able to use what has happened, what we can learn from whatever situation happens to us, whatever difficulty we have, whether it's in our body or in our environment or in our circumstances, that we can use it positively to hopefully benefit others.
That's great. Thank you so much. Everything's trying to help.
Yeah.
Gordon. You're muted.
Yeah, here I am now. I think the biggest thing that came out of everything today was gratefulness for our suffering that we've gone through. You spoke of that right away, Michelle, about the gratefulness of your accident. And I've gone through PTSD myself from my career, and I'm really grateful that I went through that, because it gave me so many new starts and a new way to look at things and such. I could go on all day, and I'll stop it there, though.
Well, it would be great if the community just took this up as a teaching, because the antidote is compassion and self-compassion. Gordon, do you know who you were in a group with?
I was with Jacqueline.
Oh, Jacqueline. Okay, right. Sorry. Yeah. All right. So, Pavi? Can you unmute, Pavi?
She's unmuted. Something's not working yet.
Okay. Pavi, I'll come back to you.
Jacqueline is here.
Yeah. So Jacqueline, can you unmute?
No, I'm okay. I can speak.
Okay.
It was really significant for me to have a distinguishing moment between the three minds, and the fact that I am in my mind all the time. And now I feel I'm learning, or may learn, how to reach my body thoughts and feelings. So that was very significant.
That's great. Thank you. I couldn't see you on my screen, so.
I know, you can't see me anywhere. I'm really not, shouldn't be seen right now.
I'm glad you're here, and I apologize.
Thank you. I'm glad you're there too.
I thought you had left.
No.
So, Pavi, can you speak now or no? Because if not, you can put it in the chat and we'll read it.
I reply on chat.
Oh, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Oh, okay, perfect. My emotion is the positive gratefulness and what I can learn. And I had actually, it was not a physical pain, but it was the mental sorrow or regret about something what happened with a friend. And when I contemplated and did this free brain practice, it was very new for me. And I'm very grateful to this new perspective for it. And I'm very grateful. Yeah, thanks.
Well, thank you very much. I love it because it makes me pause to reflect and not be driven by my threat system, which is so activated by the media and the world. So thank you for your reflection. And I did the same thing as you did, Pavi. Just recently, I had a situation with a friend, and I listened to what my head told me, and it said, stay far away. I listened to my threat system. It said, stay far away. And then I asked my heart, and my heart said, how can you do that? And so I thought, I'm going to listen to my heart. And then everything else tumbled into my heart wisdom. And so I reached out to this person, and they wrote back, and we didn't even have to talk about the conflict. We just talked about the emergence of what took place. So it can be a beautiful thing. So Pavi, who were you in group with?
I was with Michael.
Michael. Is Michael here? Michael Brooker's here. Okay, Michael, are you there?
Yeah, hey, how's it going? So yeah, it was great to chat with Pavi. I thought during the meditation, I thought about overcoming a brain injury that I had as a child. So when I was 6, going on 7, I fell off some playground equipment and banged up my head pretty bad. But as a result of it, I was diagnosed with an attention deficit disorder. I think now they call it all ADHD, but back then they made a distinction between ADD and ADHD. So they said I had ADD, but the single word was, I suppose, focus, because what that experience taught me was the ability to, basically it forced me to get an education in focus and how focus is generated and how I can, calm down enough in order to maintain my concentration on certain things. So while, I'm sure I could have learned how to focus without getting a head injury, I think that experience really is the reason why I have a very kind of intimate understanding of how I can generate focus in my own mind now. So I'm grateful for that.
So thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
I want to say, I wonder why I'm echoing.
Maybe we'll put Mike on mute again.
Okay.
Sorry, no, this should be good.
Okay, so Michael has given us a tremendous teaching here. Decky Lee has a brain injury, and I have 3 of them because after my accident, I kept falling and smacking my head. And so I continue to be a professor at University of Toronto. Decky Lee continues to try and heal. The key thing that science would say is that when we were growing up, they said that the brain was a block of cement and what you were born with is what you would die with. And this is not the case. The brain is what they now would call neuroplastic. It shapes around experiences. And so, Michael, your parents must have had a lot to do as your as well as your teachers around, okay, settle yourself down, put the brakes on the reactivity, settle down, put the brakes on, and drive the car as best you can. Because if you speed up at this point, you're not going to be able to drive the car. You're going to drive off a cliff. And so that neuroplasticity is part and parcel of what Decky Lee and I arrived to. So you heard Decky Lee say it unfolded over time. And this is because, I'm not an expert on this, but I was told my neurological system would grow back about 0.5 centimeter every year. Well, that's a long time to get the superhighways going, especially when you're in school. But you have to be patient, which is, you heard Decky Lee say, self-compassion in those times is really important. So if you assume that you're growing your neurological system based on injury, if you're a block of cement and it's been smashed, it's going to always stay smashed, or you can glue it back together, but it's still never going to be the same. But if you believe that you can actually cultivate these brains and minds, and you work with it, it has huge implications for people who have concussions. So based on Decky Lee's experience, Toronto Rehab came and started to study with us at U of T, because I really believe my healing after the surgeon's hands came from this mindfulness meditation practice. And so Toronto Rehab now recommends to any person who's concussed that they have 20 minutes of mindfulness meditation a day, and very hard to get it. You can't necessarily concentrate, as you say, and your attention flies off because you're constantly sort of watching and experiencing the world. But the more you bring yourself back home and try to practice this over the course of time, your neurological system grows and the superhighways are there as well. So I'm a great believer that you're just beginning to start to get yourself to this new mind that you want to work on, and make sure that you try to practice as often as you can, which is the state to trait piece, that if you can integrate it throughout your day, you're actually doing rehab while you're learning to live again. And I know this happened to you when you were a kid, but we always walk with our companion of what that injury can be. So thanks for that teaching. It was a great opportunity for me to speak about what the science says to us about change.
Thanks for listening. Yeah, I mean, the mind is, the brain's incredibly plastic at that age. So, I mean, if I had to have a head injury, I'm glad that I had it as a child, because I was able to bounce back rather quickly. but at the same time, there were other downstream effects that were caused by it that weren't recovered from so fast. But I don't think I was thinking about the single word when you said what's one word that you got from the teaching, and I thought, well, it has to be focus, but focus isn't advice in and of itself. Sometimes we tell each other, well, just focus, just concentrate. But focus and concentration are emergent. They're downstream of relaxation, of breathing. If you're not relaxed, you can't focus. If you're not breathing right, you can't focus. If you have some sort of distress in your nervous system, like if you feel highly anxious or aroused in a neurological way, you can't focus. So that's been one of the big learnings throughout my life, has been starting with relaxation and then allowing focus to emerge from that.
And I would say what you just said is actually not. Go ahead, Vivek.
Yeah. Thanks for walking this walk with me. Is something else that's can be part of this, in the times when we can't focus. And especially after a brain injury or someone who's just starting to learn to do this, or someone like me who just has a very busy brain, is literally, in Tibetan Buddhism, it's described as having two spies. So one spy's job is to focus, stay focused on that. And the relaxation and everything helps with that. And at the same time, it's really well recognized that there's a spy spying on the spy. And I remember someone in one of our courses saying, well, I just can't do this. And I said, well, do you know you can't do this? How often during it did you tell yourself you couldn't do it? And a lot. And I said, oh, good. So you are meditating, you're cultivating your spy, the introspection, the part that's noticing you lost the first spy, or that the one that knows that the first spy lost the focus. The first spy is supposed to be following something and he's gone in to have a beer. So that is another part of meditation. You're still meditating. So recognizing that there are periods of time when we're cultivating the spy. Oh, geez, I just lost my focus. Oh, I just lost it again. Oh, I'm over here. I'm over there. Good. You noticed. That's the point. That's meditation too. So it's also the compassion and just the wisdom of knowing, guess what? I blew that whole meditation, but I know it. And I noticed it all the way through. Yay. Oh, good. You are meditating. That is a meditation. You're cultivating. So there are times when we're cultivating that second spy as part of meditation. I've had to do that for probably 6 years. I'm only now starting to find the first spy. He's just starting to do his job right.
Yeah, it makes me think about when you talk about first spy and second spy, I think sort of like the difference between mind and mindset, or the difference between brain and mind. Like one thing that meditation does for us is allows us to tap into that witness, that second perspective. It's like we can think and use our sentience from two different lenses almost, or two different magnifications, where without mindfulness and without meditation, we are caught in this quotidian brain, in this you're kind of like a task monkey. You can't see the forest from the trees, in a sense, without mindfulness. And to be able to, at least for 15-20 minutes a day, or if even it takes, for that 20-minute session, like you only get like 1 minute of real witness, or a few seconds of it, when you got it. And it is totally transformative, because you're seeing yourself, and you're and then you're able to emotionally kind of detach from whatever trauma or whatever anxiety or in my case, my injury, and just see it for what it is, you know?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing what it's like for you. Thank you, Michael.
Sharon, say something?
Of course.
Yeah, sorry. I'm just, it's interesting because when we're talking about brain trauma and injury, I've always looked at the emotional trauma that I've had, which is, you know, as a caregiver to my late husband and my daughter and what that caused. But I don't know. I just got thinking about when I was in the army, I fell off a cliff in doing rappelling. And like, they don't focus, like they just want to get you back to work. So they focused on my legs, which I did a little bit of damage, but you know, it's funny, like we didn't even think about the brain. And then a couple of years later, I fell off a second-story balcony and landed on my back. And it took me like 2 to 10 years to get better. But again, there was never a focus on the brain. And then I was in a car that was rolled. So I'm just thinking of all this abuse that's been done, you know, to my brain. I'm sure in some way. And I guess I haven't been kind to it or acknowledged it because it was just always like, get up and get going again. And even though I you know, sleep issues and all kinds of things, I think the mindfulness came in because of the emotional piece, because for that was like flooding through the whole body. It was like literally, you know, I had a lot of that freeze response. Even like when Arunas got diagnosed this time with this cancer, I went into freeze mode. Like I would hear a loud no, you know, just no. If I wanted to get up, no. I want to do something, no. It was just like, just afraid to move completely. And, you know, I've gotten better over the past year and a half, but it's just interesting. I've never thought about physical damage that I've been doing to my body, or my body, yes, but not my brain, you know, like not being, I don't know. I just think it is cement, you know, or that's the way I was treated in the army, you know, it's like you're just one soldier of a million, you know, so, and we're going back quite a bit. Yeah.
If I might say, Sharon, that the military has recognized this, and it's only in the 1990s we discovered that the brain is the mind. So they're just they mapped out the brain, but they haven't mapped out the mind. It'll probably take another 100 years. But the Buddhists have had a mapped mind. So that's what the scientists are studying, is the mind map of what the Buddhists know, and particularly His Holiness the Dalai Lama, but other Buddhist lineages are involved. So, and the best book to read is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. So he identifies mindfulness as healing. So for those of you that I didn't get to, I apologize profusely. If you wish, could you put in your one word or a few sentences into the chat box so that others can read that as we are going through? Trina has a question, and then Decky Lee, can I turn it over to you to do what Arunas was going to do, which was the dedication, if that's okay? And I'll just, I'll still be here, but I just want to say thank you very much for gifting your time and presence to us. I very much appreciate it. I hope you walk in the presence of whatever it is arose for you around suffering. And Decky Lee and I have somehow touched your hearts more than your heads or your threat system to have you understand that we do believe that we have spent 500 years not paying attention to suffering, and you have the skill set, the tools, the practice to be able to make a difference. And Dave's just written about the pain of relationship and loss, and I was actually going to raise that with Decky Lee about pain isn't just physical. Decky Lee would speak to this wonderfully. It's social, it's fiscal, it's relational. So there's just so much more that suffering, how it touches our life, whether it be through pain or loss. So thank you for everything, everybody. Decky Lee, I pass it over to you.
Thank you. All right, so Yolisa, you need to mute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
All right. So it's just, thank you so very much, Michelle. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for bringing your wisdom, your years and years and years of wisdom. And thank you for sharing it and doing so much with it. The world has changed because of you. It's amazing. And I have to personally thank you for making it possible for me to reach out around the world with my work as well. So thank you. A very interesting thing is if you ask a Tibetan where their mind is, they always put their hand on their heart. So in Tibetan Buddhism, mind is at the heart, but at the same time, we have these three brains. So it's an interesting thing. What I want to do is dedicate everything we've done. So just thinking of everything you've heard today, take a moment to consider your own experiences, the suffering that you touched today, the wisdom that has come through from it. And just imagine all the other beings in this world that have experienced similar suffering. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You're not alone. And just make a wish that by pulling through the wisdom, the transformation that has come from that, offer that as a gift to all of those others. And feel for a moment that they're actually able to receive this. Quantum physics lets us know that actually we are affecting them. So make that wish strong. And knowing that every other being is also experiencing suffering of some kind. Make a wish that the wisdom can flow through. Wish for their enlightenment, full compassion, full wisdom. Wish for a world that becomes compassionate, wise, skillful, that honors each other, and the wisdom we all have. Thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you, David. Thank you, Arunas. Thank you, all of you. Have a great day. If you want, you can unmute your mics and say anything you want.
I did, excuse me, I did put your link, Dickie Lee, to the transformative mindfulness. So people can scroll up if they missed it. It's wonderful to get on there and check that out.
So on what I've given you the link to is the exercise, Transforming Challenges. So you can give it a go. It's on a website that you're going to find is very outdated, but the exercise is there fully intact.
I just wanted to say one thing. If you want to get into the hospitals, getting in contact with the spiritual care department, I think is a really good idea. They're looking for ways to strengthen the nurses.
Yeah, thank you.
I totally agree with that, Yolisa, because anytime I've been in a hospital, I've reached out to the spiritual care group, and it's been really, really good experience. But they can't reach out to you. You need to reach out to them.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is in every hospital in Toronto, so it may be that it's not necessarily where you live. So just, something to think about.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's in hospitals generally. I know my uncle was the director of pastoral care in Calgary.
Yeah, Calgary's a big hub too. So is Vancouver.
And Michelle and I taught Hamilton Health Sciences, mindfulness from the director down to the bookkeeper.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've also been studying neuroscience with Dr. Alex Korb, and it's what he advises is he's got a book called The Upward Spiral, and what he advises is very consistent with Buddhism.
Thank you. Thanks, Emily.
It's
All
called
right, sorry.
It's called The Upward Spiral.
Thank you. All right, so we're going to give it a day and send you guys off to lunch and love you. So take care, everybody. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Dickie Lee. Thank you, Michelle. What a wonderful morning. Thank you.
And I just have to say thank you to Michelle, because I've been in and around and with for a long time. And this is the first time I've heard her whole story on something that's a forum. So thank you.
This was recorded, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you.
Arunas, thanks for joining us, darling.
Okay. See y'all. Love you. Take care.
Love you too.